Relationships are scalable. If marketing's job is to build relationships at scale, and if relationships are built through conversation, how can marketing be used to drive conversation? We didn't really define relationships. The channels via which relationships are built have changed, and we're now, technology is allowing us to build relationships at scale on a personal level. Leverage relationships to drive growth in your organization. If you shift the focus to relationships instead of revenue, magic things happen. Relationships are at the core because they help you build affinity and trust. That's how relationships are built. What's going on, everybody? Happy Wednesday. My name is Mike Grimberg. I'm the CEO of Proofpoint Marketing, and we got Joseph Lewin with me, who's our Director of Growth. Welcome, welcome. We are starting right on time. I'll let a few people join as we get going here. In the meantime, I'll kind of set the stage a little bit what we're going to be talking about. We are talking about more sales-focused things today. So one thing I'll want to put right out there: neither Joseph nor I are sales coaches. Okay, we're not here to teach you how to close deals better, how to run a more successful discovery meeting. We're not going to talk to you about improving your pitch deck or sales deck or whatever, all those kinds of things. We might have our opinions, but that's not where we focus our time. The reality is, I think a lot of us are probably seeing this or feeling it, even if we maybe haven't identified it completely, that, things are changing. It's harder to get a hold of people. There's a lot more noise, all this kind of stuff, especially for those of us who are sellers, which, while I'm not a sales coach, I do selling for Proofpoint. So does Joseph. So we definitely feel it and see it, and I'm sure a lot of you do as well, right? I'm not gonna go into all the stats out there about, cold call connect rates and success rates decreasing and things like that. You've all probably seen those things. So we don't have to belabor that point. The reality is that there are a lot of things that you all are doing. And again, I saw the list of people who signed up. We have a number of, CEOs and leaders that signed up, as well as sales leaders and sales practitioners. So those of you who are selling consistently, you're already doing things well, right? Most of you have successful companies, or you work for successful companies. We're not going to be focused on telling you how to improve the things that you're already doing. I don't think that's our job. What we are going to be talking about is, how do you adjust to these changing market conditions and societal norms to drive more scale and consistency in your pipeline. And this word consistency is going to be, I think, a common theme for us as we go. So again, we want to focus on scale and consistency. So before we jump in here, I want to ask you all a couple questions. So for those of you who are live, looks like you have a number of folks that are live here at this point. People are trickling in. Pop it in the comments here. When was the last time you actually answered a cold call? And throw in yes in the comments if you've done this recently, if you've actually answered and picked up a cold call from a number you did not know. Anybody? I'm seeing crickets so far. I know the chat is usually a few minutes delayed, but if anybody has, please pop it in the comments. I'm curious. I'm sure there's somebody that has. That always happens, but I'm not seeing anybody yet. Okay.
Yeah, we got one. Matt Hall. Matt, thanks for jumping in live.
There you go. Matt says yes. All right.
I mean, I'll just
of course,
go
leave it to the
myself.
sales guy to say yes.
I recently got a sales call that I answered. It was coming from a number from somebody who had just recently called me. It was like a New York number. And I had just talked to somebody from New York. So I was thinking it might've been them. And I accidentally picked up a cold call.
Accidentally though, right? That's the thing. I've accidentally picked one up too, because I thought it was like my daughter's school calling or something. And I'm like, oh crap, this is not what I wanted. Okay. So, Matt, I'm curious, maybe post in the comments, more curiosity than anything is how that went, whether that conversation actually went anywhere. Now, what about cold email? How many of you have responded to cold email recently? I'll let people jump in. So I'm going to share something.
Responded positively?
That's a good point. Let's say responded positively. Fair enough. All right. So let me bring something up on the screen here. So we do polls either on, Joseph, you did a poll on LinkedIn recently. We do polls when we do some training sessions. I just pulled out a couple that I think are going to highlight what I want to. Matt says it didn't go well. So here's a couple of posts. So Joseph, you ran this poll. Have you ever worked with a vendor that cold call you on the phone? Of the 100 people that responded, it looks like maybe 20 said yes. So less than that, 19 said yes.
Yeah, 19.
I can't do math. Most people said no, right? Which is not surprising. The other poll here is like, who are you more likely to engage with, like on LinkedIn? Company page or my network? Everybody said my network. This was I think we had 15 like VP level folks from one of our clients on the training that we were running. So the reason I'm pulling this up is the reality, and based on what I'm seeing in the comments here, is we respond to people that we know. 2 core words: people and that we know. Okay, whether you know them or not, it's important. Okay, so I bring that up because I think there are 2 types of cold outbound that are successful. Number 1 is what I'll call luck. It's not exactly luck, but it's you have to have been lucky by getting the timing right. What I mean by that is they have to have actually had a need, a problem that's big enough that they're actually in market to solve for them to respond to your cold outbound, most likely. Okay. Now, you still have to get a bunch of other things right. You have to have the right personalization. You have to make it interesting enough and exciting enough for them to actually open it and respond. It's got to be right. It's got to resonate, whatever you put in there, right? So it can't be a spammy copy paste or an automated type of thing, right? So you have to get those things right, but the timing also has to be right. And as we all know, 3 to 5% of people are ever in market. That means 95% of your cold email is likely not going to work just based on that. Forget the fact of most of the stuff we get is not really personalized and is not really resonant. We'll leave that for another conversation. So you have to have luck in terms of timing. The other thing is, the other option is it's actually not cold, it's warm, meaning they know who you are, right? Going back to what we just talked about. It's warm in the sense of, sure, you might have gotten an intro. That's a really good warm, but maybe they've attended an event of yours or your company's event, right? Maybe they've downloaded some of your content. Maybe they've engaged with some of the things you've posted on LinkedIn personally. There's a variety of things that can warm somebody up. But once they know you, that opens things up.
Hey, Mike, let me take this one because somebody that I've actually responded to from a warm email like this is on the call right now. So Juan, if you're still on, give a thumbs up in the chat because you've been responding. And we were talking about me giving an example, and the example I would give is from you because you did a great job at this. So warm outbound would be an example of warm outbound. I, in a previous role at a previous job, was looking for a video hosting platform for podcasting. And I was looking to start a podcast for the company I was working for. And I ran across Wistia's platform that they were launching for podcasting. And I went to the page. I don't know if I filled out a form there or not, but I registered for the event. So they had my info. And then I got a very personalized email from Juan. He's a legend of great personalized outreach. I know he does a lot of cold calling right now, but he's extremely good at the personalization piece, which is what caught my attention. So he had two things going for him. He had that brand awareness and that warm outbound because I had already was familiar with Wistia. The first thing I did was look at the top of the email and look at who it was coming from. I'm like, oh, this is somebody from Wistia. Then he's addressing specific things personalized to me and my company. And then he's talking about something that was relevant because I was the one who had initiated originally saying I was trying to solve this podcasting issue. And so that's where warm outbound can be extremely effective, especially if you're good at doing the research and personalization like Juan is. So just want to give you a shout out while you're on the call here.
Well, and something to re-emphasize here is we're not here to tell you not to do cold calling. If you're doing it, maybe you have to from a sales process perspective that your sales leaders have set up. Again, I've got my personal opinions about cold calling, but I'm going to keep those out. Like that's not the point of this. It's more of there's an existing problem that exists because the market is shifting and we want to, again, help you scale. So really the idea here is everybody on this live right now, in one way, shape, or form, has some sort of target they're trying to hit, either directly a revenue target or a meetings target or a quota attainment target, and maybe a combination of all the above. We all have those. I've got that as the CEO of our organization, right? So the problem that we see is mindset. If your mindset is all about how do I get the revenue today, you're going to do a whole bunch of stuff that's likely going to hurt you in the long run. And what we want to help you do is shift your mindset from revenue or quota attainment or whatever to what's my fastest path to relationships, because revenue is an outcome of great relationships. If you've been following us for a while, you probably hear that line over and over and over again. So how do you do that, right? How do you, from an outbound perspective, it's doing more of that second type of, how do you do more warm outbound or warmed up outbound? And the other thing is how do you really leverage yourself and your time better? How do you scale it? Because the problem that any salesperson has, or one of the problems, really any person that's responsible for some sort of sales activity, is you're just one person. You have only so much time in the day. On top of that, I know there are a number of folks on the live right now that are from, the consulting space or advisory space, but like you're only doing whatever. Sales might only be like 20% of your time potentially, because the rest of your time is either being billable or maybe you're the CEO like me, and a bunch of your time actually needs to be spent on strategy and vision and all this stuff. And you're only selling is only 20% of your time. So your time is limited, and the number of connections and one-on-one conversations and things like that you can have is limited by your time and by the fact that you're only one person. So what's the solution? Well, you can scale yourself, if you will, and leverage your time better by going one-to-many. So I'm not saying don't reach out to people directly. I'm not saying don't send any email. Don't call. I'm not saying don't go to conferences and try to network with people. Do all that. But you can take a portion of your time and dedicate it to social. That's what we're going to focus on. So you can scale yourself by being more active out there and getting in front of more people. Okay, so what are the things you're already doing that you can scale? I'd be willing to bet that the majority of you that are doing sales activity have either a very solid target account and target lead list, or at least a decent idea of your ICP and who you're going after. Again, depending on the maturity of your go-to-market and sales motion and your organization and things like that. There's a spectrum there, but you already at minimum have a good idea of who they are. Great. You can be and should be connecting with them on LinkedIn. You should be engaging with them on LinkedIn, and you could be collaborating with them on LinkedIn in that order. Like you can't start collaborating before you connect and engage, realistically. And last but not least, showing your expertise. Now, what I see happen a lot, and again, this gets back to mindset, people try to shortcut it. They go, okay, I'm going to get active and I'm going to talk about everything that we do, and I'm going to share our expertise or my personal expertise, depending on what your role in the organization is and your experience in the industry. And they start talking about, if you're selling product, you start talking about product features or whatever, or you start talking about service lines and stuff like that. You're talking about service like expertise. Problem is nobody knows who the hell you are yet. So you're pretty much, again, you're going in cold, but you're going in cold one to many. So focus on building the relationship first.
Yeah, Mike, I think one thing just as you're going into it, because what I see happen a lot of times with sales folks is they go, hey, I need to be active on LinkedIn and I need to be posting content. And then when they do start posting content, it really is product focused. It's kind of the me focused content. So again, you're focusing on how do I get somebody to know about my products, about my company, that I exist, so that, they're ready to buy from me, instead of going, what is it that my customers really care about? What are the pain points and problems that they face on a regular basis? And that doesn't mean you don't ever post about product offerings, but the majority of stuff that I see from sales reps is like, hey, check it out. I offer this product, or I'm available in your area, or I just installed XYZ at this customer. And I think there is some value in doing that on occasion. But if that's all you post, then people tune you out really quickly. Whereas when you focus more on the relationship, and the reason I'm bringing this up is it really is that mindset shift. Like, how do you take it from saying, what can I get out of this, to what can I give and add value? And that's really where that relationship building can start and builds that rapport for when you do have the ask, or when you, when it is appropriate to start reaching out and letting people know what you do.
So Matt, the one thing, sell the problem, but even more so, sell the pain. Sell the pain and sell the outcome value of after the pain goes away, or how do you take that pain away? Because I see people actually this gets in the marketing, but also in the sales, like they focus on the problem, but depending on who you're talking to, the problem, the person you might be talking to might be a step away from that problem, but they have a very acute pain that they're feeling because of the root problem, or they might not have realized what the hell the problem is yet. So that's the other thing. So one thing I want to mention here is, from a mindset perspective, again, we want to really look at short-term, medium-term, long-term, and we talk about this in terms of building affinity, starting conversations, and nurturing relationships. And the thing to remember is people don't build relationships directly with your organization. So this is the problem, that if all you're doing, I see this all the time with sales leaders. I see it with CMOs. I see it with even CEOs. All they do is just post, hey, my company did this. They pretty much post like company announcements. They're using a megaphone of like, hey, look how awesome we are. The reality is nobody cares, because they're not building their relationship with your company. They're going to build a relationship with your people, your ideas, and within relevant groups. And through those vehicles, they will build affinity to your brand. So as an individual contributor that's doing sales, you should also be thinking about, how do I build affinity? How do I start conversations? How do I nurture these relationships? So getting active on social in general, and we're going to talk about some very specific details of how, and talk through some tactical things in a minute. It really allows you to kind of have a short-term, medium-term, and long-term impact, right? And the problem, another problem that I often see is there's not enough focus on consistency, right? Now, some of this is the incentives are wrong. We look at things on a quarterly basis and things like that. But the reality is, the bigger the business that you're working for, the more consistency for the business matters, right? So you might have had you might be having an awesome Q3, but if you haven't worked on figuring out what your Q4 is going to look like, you might have a really crappy Q4, and that might be a really big problem, because the business was forecast to have a consistent trajectory, right? So consistency becomes a really, really important thing. And this is where this concept really comes into play, where by being out there and connecting, engaging, collaborating. We'll talk about all these examples in a minute, like I said, and then sharing your expertise. You are able to not only have short-term impact by influencing maybe deals that maybe got stuck in Q3 right now, but you can also start conversations that are going to impact your pipeline for Q4 and start building affinity for the ideas that will impact your pipeline in Q1 of next year and later. And that allows you to have a softer landing, if you will, in future quarters and have better things built up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So let's talk about how we do all that, right?
Mike, real quick, just to kind of tie a thread on everything we were talking about. So the goal is, how do we efficiently create a consistent way to be building our pipeline and nurturing current relationships? And the challenge is in sales roles, a lot of times it's up and down. You build up your pipeline, and then you have to start spending your time managing that pipeline so that it closes, and then you start losing your future pipeline, and then you've got that roller coaster quota experience where one month you're above, next month you're below, or it depends on the sales cycle and everything too. But how do you even that out without spending all of your nights and weekends prospecting or managing your deals or whatever? And so it's really when you tie a bunch of pieces together. So reaching out and initiating conversations is important if you're in sales. So what we're not saying, to Mike's point, is don't be doing any outreach to initiate conversations. And there's different ways to do that. Could be calling, could be emailing, could be direct messages. The point is, how do you maximize the value you're getting out of those? And if you're creating content and being active, and some of these things we're going to share with you in a minute, into the mix of what you're doing, it's going to maximize the effectiveness of what you're doing in the other places. So when you do send that email, or you make that phone call, or you're sending a DM through LinkedIn, instead of that person having no idea who you are, if you're consistently showing up over and over and over again, adding value, then when you reach out to that person, it's just going to be a lot more effective. So you can do less of those activities, getting more value out of each one, and that helps to create that consistency. And then that content that you're creating throughout also makes it easier to nurture the relationships that you've already built. So every time as you layer these things on top of each other, it helps create that consistency.
Yep. So one of the things to be thinking about is, as you are doing all your regular activity, almost think of social as a way to clone yourself to a certain extent. Like, if you are able to spend just a little bit of time getting out there, and I'm not yes, ideally you should be creating content, but even without that, you're engaging and commenting. Those things live out there while you're doing other things. So let's assume there's somebody in your target account that you're following, and maybe they post a question, maybe they post about something that they're working on or whatever, and you can add some value in a comment. You say something smart or whatever it is, that comment stays there while you go on and you go do other stuff. Now, obviously there's a shelf life to everything on LinkedIn and things like that, but the point is it's still there, right? And people will continue to see it as they do it. And you get exposure to other networks and other people and that follow that particular person. And a lot of the time, that's your way to get exposure to some of the decision makers you want to get in front of that you can't. If you're trying to get in front of the CEO, sometimes one of the easiest things is find a way to connect and engage with other people in the organization, because it's almost a guarantee that they are connected. And even though you might not be able to get in front of them right away, they will see some of that content. If something piques their interest, they might even click and look at your profile and they go, oh, that's interesting. They might even click through and look at your company page. And they go, oh, wow, and maybe you get lucky, by the way, and they are in market for something. That's when you can impact your pipeline today, right? Or at least in Q4, let's just say. So one of the things I want to share is, a lot of time, especially when we have our sales hat on, we're really thinking, again, what's my What's my fastest path to revenue? Oh, I got to go to decision maker. And we completely forget about the concept of referrals and also the broader ecosystem, right? So who are the various influencers? Who are the different people that can influence this buying decision, whether they're internal to the organization or external to the organization? Okay. And a couple of things to be thinking about is, well, sometimes your fastest path to relationship actually is inside your own organization. It might be an SME on your team. Maybe it's an engineer or a consultant or whatever that already has that relationship. Great. Potentially by just being active, maybe they reshare something that you posted, right? So there's kind of an indirect way. But the other is, what if you just reach out to them like, hey, I'm trying to get in touch with so-and-so. We just hosted this live event or whatever. Can you share this with this person, or can you introduce me and things like that, right? So that kind of stuff. So one thing I'll put out here is this. So a lot of the time when we're doing our outreach, we're really going to be focused on trying to, and this is specifically focused on referrals, but the same kind of concept really applies to direct outreach in the sense of we're really focused on the decision makers. We're focused all the way here, and these are the hardest people to get in front of, right? The CEO or the CTO or the CFO is the hardest person to get in front of, just like your client is the hardest person to get a referral from, because the value exchange has already been done. Your missed opportunity really is all the way over here, where you can be building this awareness, your presence on LinkedIn specifically, or it might be a different channel if depending on your industry. Just say maybe it's Reddit if you're trying to deal with engineers or something, let's just say, but probably LinkedIn specifically, which is what we're going to focus on. Your missed opportunities here. How can you make more people aware of you and your expertise? And then not only are those opportunities to then start conversations, but they might also be opportunities to get people to refer to you, right? Like, hey, I just saw, I'm making this up, Juan, like, hey, I just saw somebody post something, and I might go, oh, I just saw Juan post something about this. I might tag him in that, in a comment about, oh, I just saw Juan post a smart thing about whatever. I've done this all the time, right? So things like that. So you're missing these opportunities by only focusing on decision makers and clients and partners and things like that. So really understand your ecosystem. Understand which relationships are really valuable and powerful for you to build. Joseph, looks like you're having some audio issues.
Am I back?
You're back. All right. You're not having audio issues.
My camera started like flashing all weird, and I unplugged it and plugged it back in.
All right. So we can share some examples, right? So really from a mindset perspective, I'll kind of do a quick review here. Change your mindset to focusing on the source rather than the outcome. So fastest path to revenue, or to relationships rather than fastest path to revenue, because the revenue will come from the right relationships that you build. From a skill set perspective, really hone in on your ecosystem, understand that ecosystem. And when you think about target lists, even think about broader than just target accounts per se. Think about target relationships. So is there a key opinion leader who you should be really focused on building a relationship with and connecting with, engaging with, collaborating with, right? Do you invite them onto your company's podcast if you have one? Do you invite them onto an event like this if you have one? Do you invite them to co-present at a conference you're going to? I mean, again, a variety of ways you could do it. But so things like that. An example, and then from there, you can start showing your expertise, whether that be about the product, about the industry, about the pain that people are experiencing, et cetera, et cetera. So an example that just happened recently, and Jim, I don't know if you're on, I don't think you are, but here's something that, again, just randomly happened over the last couple of weeks. So I posted something This guy reacted to it. Jim then reached out to me and said, "Hey, Mike, been following you for a while. Not sure why I haven't invited you before, but I host this show. Would love to have you on." I was just on a show, and then he posted, and now I get exposure to his network. Okay. So these are the types of things that you should be thinking about. Like, who are the gyms in your world that you can leverage and build relationships with to get this kind of exposure? Okay. Joseph, I know you've got a bunch of examples that you've had in a similar way where you've been on people's podcasts.
Mike, I actually have a great example from a friend of mine that I talked to yesterday that pulls all this stuff together. So my friend David is in a very complex B2B enterprise sale. It's in the security space. And, he's done a lot of the traditional cold calling and cold emailing in the past, but recently, especially, switched into a new industry within the last year. And so he doesn't have the same level of credibility that he did in the previous industry. So he started focusing on LinkedIn and specifically not posting content, but doing live events where he invited key opinion leaders to join him. And these are strategic relationships. So I think this is also key, is what Mike's getting at is you're not just necessarily being willy-nilly about who you're connecting with and just saying I'll have a conversation with anybody anytime. You can get value from doing that, but as a salesperson, you got to focus your time. So it's picking strategic relationships that you want to build and then figuring out a way to have conversations with those people. And they're not always the decision maker, to Mike's point, but he invited people that were both potential customers who had an area of expertise to a live where he had a conversation just like this with them. And then he also, by doing that, ultimately ended up having subject matter experts and key opinion leaders in his space start engaging in the comments on those lives. And then he'd invite them to come on the show. And some of those folks weren't directly decision makers, but they're very influential in the space. So then he ends up going to this in-person event, and one of the people he wanted to reach on during that event ends up coming up to him and saying, "Hey, I've been following your lives on LinkedIn. Great stuff. Keep it up." And then he's able to have a conversation with him. And I believe he said he actually ended up having him on one of the live events. And then he's had a customer that had gone, or a prospect that had gone dark. And then he ended up inviting him to come on. And the guy had said that he didn't have any budget for that year. And he ended up, after the live, going, "Hey, I think we actually just had a project open up." And he closed a huge deal through that as well. And then he shared a final story that was just kind of ties exactly what you said together here, Mike, is by doing those lives, he started to post content now, but he wasn't focusing on his own subject matter expertise, just getting on, asking people who already have expertise questions and kind of being a facilitator. So he ended up having a meeting with one of the bigger companies in their target list that his CEO had gotten together. And so they had a bunch of senior leaders from that team, including the CEO, and then David and his crew, including his CEO, were on this call. Well, they start making introductions, and the CEO of the other company said, "David, I've been seeing your content on LinkedIn. It's great. Keep that up. Keep it coming." And so you can't really have a better intro, both for potential work with that customer, but also made him look really good to his boss that the CEO of this huge target account is following his stuff on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Well, that's a perfect example, Joseph, because again, I was talking about think about it like duplicating yourself, right? Especially for when it comes to trying to get in front of your the key decision makers. The higher up the ladder they go, the harder it is to get in front of them for a variety of reasons, not least of which is they're busy, right? Not that the rest of us are not, but and this is a perfect example. I don't know if in this case David had tried to reach out to him directly or not, but the point is the CEO saw this, and now that this is something that can help this deal move faster, right? So when we think about this, right, it starts the same pieces the same activities are used to build affinity, right? So the reality is in this example, David was building affinity within this organization, and the same content is then now being used to nurture that relationship. So, which is now, initially it was, okay, that was more a longer term play. Now that you get to the quarter you're in, well, now you can take advantage of that. So it compounds. And that's the other way to think about it.
Yeah, and the other things that kind of I felt like make that a good story for what you had just shared is it's multiplying the effort that he's spending. So he is going to a lot of in-person events, but when he's going to those events, he now has meetings scheduled with people who he's going to create content with that he's wanted to talk to and have meetings with anyway. And now they want to talk with him. And he's even getting invited into conversations at those events. Whereas in the past, when he would go to events, he would just have to be chasing people around and trying to start conversations with people. But those conversations are already happening before the event. And then the event's really the culmination of that. So majorly maximizing the value out of each event that he's going to. But the other thing is you don't know who's viewing your content. So from what I understand, that CEO had never liked or commented on any of his posts, but he's been paying attention to what he's putting out there. So just because you're posting something and somebody, your decision makers aren't getting involved doesn't mean that they're not seeing it and being influenced by that content as well.
Yeah. Now here's the fun one, and this is where getting your marketing team involved could really help too. So, and this is something that we're doing right now, is once you get started and you are creating content, you could be talking to your marketing team to say, hey, we want to, can we put some budget behind running some thought leader ads? Now that can give you very targeted exposure just to the exact people that you want to get in front of. Now, obviously there's some tricks to get your list small enough and things like that. I won't get into that right now. If anyone's got questions about it, just reach out to me directly. We can chat. But once you're doing this and you start seeing some success, now you've got a way to say, hey, can we run some, like, again, so what we're doing right now is an example, like we've got some of my content that's being promoted through thought leader ads that are promoted by Proofpoint, but it's got my face and everything. It's a minor video content, and they're targeted to specific people in the Phoenix Scottsdale area, because we're just choosing to limit our budget that way and focus on people that I can meet in person with if I can. Joseph, we're running the same thing for him in Cincinnati, right? And it's none of it. And by the way, none of this stuff is, hey, come schedule a meeting with me. It's really about getting your expertise out there in front of the right people. Because, by the way, as a salesperson, you have even more, you got to work even harder, because everybody, once they see it's a salesperson, shit, I'm going to get sold. Do they do they really know what they're talking about? Are they just trying to sell me? Like, all these things are like, we've been subconsciously trained at this point to think that way. Okay. So the more you can build that trust, one to many, and before you ever actually connect with them, the more effective that first meeting is going to be when you get it. The warmer that outreach is going to be. So maybe whatever, let's assume you've been doing this, you've been running these ads, whatever it is. And then, I don't know, you get some sort of insight, maybe somebody that was in that organization that just left that you happen to know gives you like an insider tip of, hey, they're really struggling with XYZ. You should reach out now. Cool. Now, when you go in, guess what? That outreach is much warmer, right? You still have to do you still have to be relevant and whatever, but it's warmer. They've hopefully, and ideally, you can even tell, like, they've seen your face. They know who you are. They know that you know what you're talking about, that you can actually help them solve the problem as a salesperson, not just pitch them on, give them a demo or pitch them on your, standard sales deck or whatever it is. So let's see. I'm gonna pull up a couple more examples, Joseph. So, we talk. Let's get more specific. Yep, exactly, Matt. Joseph was talking about live events, right? Obviously, we're running a live event right now. Ours is different because we generally don't invite other people. We're more focused on this kind of educational type format. That's just us, but that's our choice. However, Joseph, I know you've done this yourself.
Yeah.
Right? You've run lives. You've invited people that either you specifically want to work with or do business with. you always tell the story about how we met and how you got this job is by inviting me on your podcast that you were running, right? So there are a lot of ways that you could play this.
This example is my previous boss.
I'll let you
talk about it. He has good expertise in this particular area. So again, it's being strategic about who you're building relationships with and continuing to nurture relationships that you already have. In this case, it's more, in the long run, maybe we could have some partnership opportunities or things like that with these guys from my previous company. But it's also when you have somebody that has expertise and you go live with them, you're borrowing some of their expertise for yourself, and you're also giving their credibility for yourself, and you're also giving them credibility. So it's this balance between having people on that you're wanting to build a deeper relationship with, and then having people on that are going to help build that affinity portion of it and that expertise portion of it. And you kind of need to have a balance of both of those things at the same time. But I have a better example from a previous job that I was being extremely intentional. We had created this infographic about a particular topic, and we posted it, and then somebody from one of our main target accounts shared it. So then I reached out to her and invited her to, it wasn't a live at that point. If I did it now, I do it as a live. But at that point, I had her on a video interview that I recorded and then created a video-driven blog post off of that. But the reason that I had reached out to her originally was I wanted to build a relationship with her because it's a target account that we couldn't get into any other way. And then it turned out that she was actually much closer to the problem than any of the people we were reaching out to, because she was lower down title-wise, but she was the one that was actually implementing and dealing with the problem. So she wasn't the person who would make the final decision, but she was definitely in the internal champion seat. And so after the recording, then I started asking her some questions, and it kind of brought up the pain of what we were helping to solve. And we ended up having a demo call and then, continue that conversation with them. And that was very strategic. It was creating content, then reaching out to somebody who engaged with that at a target account, inviting them to create content with me, and then, continuing the conversation from there. And at the end of the day, I'm still friends with her, and I've invited her to do other stuff because we built a relationship and rapport that goes way beyond that current moment. And so it's building deep relationships with people. And when you invite somebody on to create content with you, it does that in a way that I haven't come across anything else that comes close to that from a business standpoint. So
it's not, we're going to be coming up on time here, and we want to be, I know everyone's got places to go and things to do. So, again, mindset perspective, focus on the relationship. And the other thing I want to mention is be genuinely curious. Because if you're not, you're going to struggle with this. I mean, you're going to struggle, I think, in general, but with this specifically, because you're not going to ask the right questions, and you're not going to be curious about what people really want to know and what problems and pain points they have and things like that. So from there, let's get tactical for a few minutes. So what do? You've got first of all, again, understand the ecosystem and build your list. Awesome. And then start connecting with these people. Now I'll give you everyone kind of asks, well, what's the right way to do it and whatever. I'll give you my framework for it. I don't know that there's a right or a wrong way, to be honest. Here's generally how I break things apart. If it's somebody that is active on LinkedIn, I'm first going to engage. So I'm going to like their stuff. I'm going to comment, and I'm not talking about, hey, awesome post. Like, no, don't do that bullshit. Like, only comment if you have some value you can add, right? So all of it, and this is where I really think more broadly, because we all have, we're multifaceted people. We all have different interests. Like, someone posts something about AI. I'm not an AI expert, but I have an interest in it. I can add some value to the conversation. If someone posts something about leadership, I can add some value to that conversation. Anyway, so make the comments valuable. So engage first a couple of times, 2 to 3. And then if they are active and they have a large following, or not a following, if they have a lot of connections, I'll just I'll oftentimes send a blank connect request. If they engaged with my comment, I'll usually reference that. I'll say, hey, awesome, awesome conversation. Glad we connected. Look forward to learning more from you. It's pretty basic, but it still references the specific thing. Okay. If they are not active, but they have a lot of connections, usually what that means is they've been on the platform for a long time and they accept a lot of people. I'll just send them a blank connect request. If they are not active and they have very few connections, I will try to find a way to personalize it. So I might poke the bear a bit and see if there's a particular problem they have that I've noticed. Like maybe it's, again, I'm using ourselves as an example, maybe it's with their website or something that their marketing team is doing, or some opportunity they're missing, or things like that. Or just something I know, whatever. Maybe maybe I know they attended a conference or something like that. I'll mention that, but I'll try to find some way to personalize it, because usually that means they're being much more selective about who they accept in their circle, and they're not likely to accept a blank connect request. Not always, but that's my basic framework for connecting. All right. And LinkedIn gives you, if you want to be safe, say 50 per week. So you should always be ideally maxing that out. It shouldn't take you long. If you've built your list, you should be able to find, for a while, 50 people to send connect requests to throughout the week. So that's 10 a day. That's not a lot. That should take you, once you get in the swing of things, 5 to maybe 10 minutes at most. Especially like if they're just blank ones, that should take you virtually no time. If a few of them you have to personalize, then go through that. Next is engaging. I kind of already mentioned, make sure your comments are valuable. Also, there are 2 lists that I would recommend you make, especially if you're using Sales Navigator. One is going to be your target account list. So people with their target lead list, people within those target accounts. I'd recommend making a separate list, which are your, call it influencers or KOLs or whatever you want. Have a list of those people. So again, understand your ecosystem. Who are the people that can influence decisions? And then every single day, if you can, or at least a couple times a week, make sure that you are one of the first people to leave a thoughtful comment on their content for reasons I already mentioned earlier. That's engaging. Once you do those, over time, you can start asking for collaborations. Again, this is where you should be working with your marketing team if you can. If your company's running a podcast, see if you can invite this person on the show. If they run webinars, see if you can get them to participate in a webinar panel. Again, I already mentioned a number of other examples at like live events and stuff like that. Okay. If your marketing team is doing nothing, you can run this on your own. The example that Joseph gave earlier for his buddy David, he's just doing this by himself. Joseph, I know you've done this on your own in prior companies. Okay. Doing a live is not a big production. It doesn't have to be. You don't have to do a bunch of post-production. You don't need a fancy camera. You don't need a fancy microphone. You can do it on a fairly bare bones budget and not even take up a bunch of time. And you don't have to run it for an hour like we're doing right now. You can run it for 30 minutes, 15 minutes.
It really doesn't even take any budget. You can get StreamYard for free. You do have to use an off-board. It's kind of annoying, but you have to use a third-party program like Restream or StreamYard, which is what we're using right now. And I mean, you can have a paid account, or if you're paying for it, just use the free version and find somebody that you want to build a relationship with. And right now, or as soon as this call is done, reach out and say, hey, I saw that you were doing XYZ event and you shared this thing, or whatever way you can connect to their expertise, and say, I'd love to have you on to talk about this live. Or when you're having a conversation with a prospective customer or somebody in an event you want to build a relationship with, you just say, hey, I'd love to continue this conversation on a live because it's really valuable to me and I've learned a lot. I'd love to be able to share your ideas with, my LinkedIn connections, whatever. And not everybody's going to say yes, but you'll be surprised at how many people will, because you're giving them a platform to share their ideas and to look good.
Really quickly, I share one other example of kind of what I mentioned is thinking outside of your target accounts and looking at influencers. Here's an example. So this guy, we actually we had Mark on our podcast. So I invited him to speak. I connected with him prior to that, did all the engaging stuff. And then I posted something and I tagged him, and guess what? he reposted and made a comment. He's got a following of like close to 30,000 people, who many of them are people that we would probably want to do business with at some point. Okay. So there's an example of how that can work. Last but not least, gets into showing expertise. And that's where the more you do this, first of all, the more conversations you have, the more you can show your expertise, because you're going to learn what problems and pain points people have. And you can literally just, if you're good in front of the camera, then record a short video. You can ask your marketing team for help here. Like, hey, I really want to get some video content. Like maybe you have a studio, or maybe you have access to that if you want to, so you can record higher quality video. If you don't, maybe you've got access to a video producing resource that can say, hey, can I get somebody to produce whatever 5 2-minute clips for me and whatnot. Okay. And you can record those that are answering specific problems or pain points. So things you think about, like things you consistently have to answer in a discovery call, record videos about that. Okay. And especially focus on the pain that they're related to. Things like that. So
one more example, Mike, that I shared today, I shared a post about it. If you're not used to being on video and you're not used to sharing expertise, if you have opinions or point of view on things that are happening in your industry, like in the news in your industry, super easy way to do that is find an article where somebody's talking about something that you have an opinion about, whether you agree or you disagree, or you want to use that to emphasize a point that you run into all the time. And super easy. You get Loom for free to share your screen. You go to that article and you read the headline and a couple of the key points that you have an opinion about, and share your opinion. So, if you're in the biotech consulting space, which was the example I was using earlier, it could be, hey, the funding landscape is getting really tough in biotech. And then you riff on that and talk about our customers are experiencing these same things, or, whatever. Or if you're in the security space, maybe there's, something going on with AI and security, and AI is being used to hack into systems, and you could riff on that and talk about it. So you don't have to share the same deep level of expertise that you would if you're just going to stare into the camera and give your thoughts that way. It's kind of a lower barrier to entry to do that. So there are a lot of, we can dive in a ton of details, and there are a lot of tactical things that you can do. The reality is that'll take much more time than even an hour on here. So because we've gotten some of this feedback, like the consistent thing is, well, what do I post? How do I engage? Who do I engage with? How do I post? Like, how do I get the right type of content that's going to work, and all these kinds of things? Like, these are consistent questions we get. We developed a training program for it that we're going to start running. So Joseph, I'll let you talk about it. Yeah. So the two things I hear from salespeople, both I ran a poll on it, but this is also consistently comes up in conversations, is I don't have time to post because I have other urgent things I have to do for my job. And so even though I want to post and I know I need to, I don't have the time to be spending 30 minutes to an hour every day posting. And then the other one that I hear is, I don't know what to post, to, like Mike just said. So the goal of this training is to both give you the tools that you need and walk you through exactly how to create content faster, what you should focus on, how you engage, and the training aspect of all of that, but also being an accountability piece, because I think that's one of the pieces that I've seen be most effective. When you want to do this, the biggest thing is just getting over the hurdle and posting consistently for 4 or 5 weeks. And once you get into that rhythm of doing it consistently, you maintain that. So this is a 6-week program. We're going to meet once a week on Tuesday nights from 4 to 5 p.m. for an hour with a group of it'll be me and a group of other reps that are trying to activate on LinkedIn and build relationships through LinkedIn. We'll do the training, and then we'll work together with some group activities, and then give you homework to go out and create this content. And I'll be working with you to review that content and help you tweak it so that you get more engagement and can start more conversations through it. And to kick off this program, we're starting it at $97 per person to jump in. So super affordable. And we'd love to see you join. I'm going to post. Oh, you got it. Post a link to that. So if you're looking to build relationships on LinkedIn, this is the training program for you. Oh, Mike, you're muted.
Oh, I was like, look at that, almost right on time. So that's all we've got, folks. If anyone's got questions about any of this stuff, you want to dig in, if you want to talk about, hey, how do we leverage thought leader ads to accelerate this, things like that, just feel free to reach out to us directly. Happy to chat about these things. And hope to see more of you on LinkedIn. And we'll wrap it up with that. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you in a couple weeks.